Hi. One of the other books that we're going to be reading this year during Reading and Language Arts is called Little House in the Big Woods. You may have read it before, or you may have had it read to you before as a read aloud in first or second grade. I think that I read it when I was a second grader, and I was in a second, third grade combo, and I was a really fast reader. And so I read it when I was in second grade, but it's really a fourth grade book. And it's the story of a real person. Laura Ingalls Wilder was a real woman who grew up in the 1800s and lived with her family. At first, her family lived in the woods in the middle of nowhere with just trees. They had very few neighbors. And then they decided to move to the prairie land, the plains of the Great Plains of the United States, and they settled and built a farm. And she became an author with her daughter. She and her daughter both like to write, and they decided to write her life story from when she was very little to when she became a grown up, and when she was a grown up, she became a teacher. And so you have maybe have read some of the series of books that are about her life. They're super interesting. One of the reasons why I like to have you read this book is because it's on your level. It's pretty easy to read. It's not too tough to read. And also, it's really interesting. She describes processes and things that happened in the olden days and machines and how things were done, and it's basically a story of process. So by the time you're done reading this book, you will know how to make cheese, milk a cow, make a hat, build a house. Actually, no, not really build a house. In the second book, Little House on the Prairie, you learn how to build a house, how to build a fireplace. She goes through and she describes the process of doing many, many things that we don't do anymore. If I'm going to build a house, I call somebody else to do it because it's hard to build a house. If I'm going to make cheese, I go to the grocery store and I buy cheese. If I'm going to milk a cow, I have actually milked a cow before. My grandparents had a farm, and I didn't like doing it. It was scary because the cow was knew that I was an idiot and that I didn't know what I was doing. So we learn a lot about things as they were in the 1800s. And since even though we're going to be studying California history, and this book didn't take place in California, many of the same processes that people did in the 1800s were processes that happened here in California. So in the 1800s. So we're going to start, and I will show you the pictures because the pictures are fabulous in this book. And also, sometimes when she's describing things, it's hard to tell what she's talking about, and the pictures give you all kinds of clues. So, this is the first picture. You can see their little house, you can see Ma and Pa, you can see her sister Mary is very proper and appropriate and is standing there holding flowers. And then you can see Laura. Laura's got brown hair and she's kind of a little wild little girl, and you can see that she's kind of skipping and dancing because she's a little bit more of a pistol than her sister is. Little House in the Big Woods. Once upon a time, 60 years ago, a little girl lived in the big woods of Wisconsin in a little gray house made of logs. The great dark trees of the big woods stood all around the house, and beyond them were other trees, and beyond them were more trees. As far as a man could go to the north in a day, or a week, or a whole month, there was nothing but woods. There were no houses. There were no roads. There were no people. There were only trees and the wild animals who had their homes among them. Wolves lived in the big woods, and bears and huge wild cats. Muskrats and mink and otter lived by the streams. Foxes had dens in the hills, and deer roamed everywhere. To the east of the little log house and to the west, there were miles upon miles of trees, and only a few little log houses scattered far apart in the edge of the big woods. So far as the little girl could see, there was only the one little house where she lived with her father and mother, her sister Mary, and baby sister Carrie. A wagon track ran before the house, turning and twisting out of sight in the woods where the wild animals lived, but the little girl did not know where it went, nor what might be at the end of it. The little girl was named Laura, and she called her father Pa and her mother Ma. In those days and in that place, children did not say father and mother, nor mama and papa as they do now. I remember when I was a little girl and I read this book, I called my dad Pa once. He got really mad at me. He said, "We don't talk like that." So he wanted me to call him dad or father. At night, when Laura lay awake in the trundle bed, she listened and could not hear anything at all but the sound of the trees whispering together. Sometimes far away in the night, a wolf howled. Then he came nearer and howled again. It was a scary sound. Laura knew that wolves would eat little girls, but she was safe inside the solid log walls. Her father's gun hung over the door, and good old Jack, the brindle bulldog, lay on guard before it. Her father would say, "Go to sleep, Laura. Jack won't let the wolves in." So Laura snuggled under the covers of the trundle bed, close beside Mary, and went to sleep. One night her father picked her up out of bed and carried her to the window so that she might see the wolves. There were two of them sitting in front of the house. They looked like shaggy dogs. They pointed their noses at the big bright moon and howled. Jack paced up and down before the door, growling. The hair stood up along his back, and he showed his sharp, fierce teeth to the wolves. They howled, but they could not get in. The house was a comfortable house. So now she's going to describe the house in really good detail so that by the time she's done describing it, you can picture the house exactly in your mind. You'll be able to figure out exactly what it looked like, how it's laid out, where all the rooms are. The house was a comfortable house. Upstairs there was a large attic, pleasant to play in when the rain drummed on the roof. Downstairs was the small bedroom and the big room. The bedroom had a window that closed with a wooden shutter. The big room had two windows with glass in the panes, and it had two doors, a front door and a back door. In the 1800s, if you lived in a cabin, usually you were really lucky if you had glass windows. Sometimes what they would do is they would put this kind of waxy paper over the space where the windows were, and that would keep the bugs from getting into your house. But only people that were kind of had a little bit of money, that were a little bit wealthy, had glass windows in the 1800s. And one of the reasons also was because it was hard to get the glass to your cabin. So the glass had to be put on a wagon, which, was rode really hard and would break the glass. They didn't have fancy glass trucks like sometimes you see when you're in traffic jams. You'll see glass trucks that have sheets of glass for windows on them. So if you had glass windows, you were a pretty successful person. It was kind of a sign of being up and coming. The big room had two windows with glass in the panes, and it had two doors, a front door and a back door. All around the house was a crooked rail fence to keep the bears and the deer away. In the yard in front of the house were two beautiful big oak trees. Every morning, as soon as she was awake, Laura ran to look out of the window, and one morning she saw in each of the big trees a dead deer hanging from a branch. Pa had shot the deer the day before, and Laura had been asleep when he brought them home at night and hung them high in the trees so the wolves could not get the meat. That day Pa and Ma and Laura and Mary had fresh venison for dinner. It was so good that Laura wished they could eat it all, but most of the meat must be salted and smoked and packed away to be eaten in the winter. For winter was coming. The days were shorter, the frost crawled up the window panes at night. Soon the snow would come, then the log house would be almost buried in snowdrifts, and the lake and the streams would freeze. In the bitter cold weather, Pa could not be sure of finding any wild game to shoot for meat. The bears would be hidden away in their dens, where they slept soundly all winter long. The squirrels would be curled in their nests in hollow trees, with their furry tails wrapped snugly around their noses. The deer and the rabbits would be shy and swift. Even if Pa could get a deer, it would be poor and thin, not fat and plump as deer are in the fall. Pa might hunt alone all day in the bitter cold in the big woods covered with snow and come home at night with nothing for Ma and Mary and Laura to eat. So as much food as possible must be stored away in the little house before winter came. Pa skinned the deer carefully and salted and stretched the hides, for he would make soft leather of them. Then he cut up the meat and sprinkled salt over the pieces as he laid them on a board. So if you had a whole lot of meat, deer are large animals, and so you did not have a refrigerator in the 1800s, and so what they would do is they would pour salt all over the meat, and that would keep it from rotting or from going bad. Because they couldn't put it in the refrigerator like we do now. We go to the store and we buy meat and we put it in the fridge. They didn't have that, so they would immediately cover it in salt, and the salt would preserve it and keep it from going rotten so that it would last. It wouldn't last forever, but it would last for a while. It also was kind of bad for you to eat because it was really salty. So your stomach was, you were eating a lot of salt when you ate salted meat. More so than like the saltiest potato chips. Standing on end in the yard was a tall length cut from the trunk of a big hollow tree. Pa had driven nails inside as far as he could reach from each end. Then he stood it up, put the little roof over the top, and cut a little door on one side near the bottom. On the piece that he cut out, he fastened leather hinges. Then he fitted it into place, and that was the little door with the bark still on it. After the deer meat had been salted several days, Pa cut a hole near the end of each piece and put a string through it. Laura watched him do this, and then she watched him hang the meat on the nails in the hollow log. So he's going to smoke the meat so that they have deer jerky out of it. And a lot of you have probably eaten beef jerky, right? It's really chewy. My dogs love eating jerky. They love chicken jerky. But even my dogs are like, they're gnawing on it because it's really, really dry and tough. He reached up through the little door and hung meat on the nails as far as he could reach. Then he put the ladder against the log and climbed up to the top, moved the roof to one side, and reached down inside to hang meat on those nails. Then Pa put the roof back again, climbed down the ladder, and said to Laura, "Run over to the chopping block and fetch me some of those green hickory chips, new clean white ones." So Laura ran to the block where Pa chopped wood and filled her apron with the fresh, sweet-smelling chips. Just inside the little door in the hollow log, Pa built a fire of tiny bits of bark and moss, and he laid some of the chips on it very carefully. Instead of burning quickly, the green chips smoldered and filled the hollow log with thick, choking smoke. Pa shut the door, and a little smoke squeezed through the crack around it, and the little smoke came out through the roof, but most of it was shut in with the meat. "There's nothing better than good hickory smoke," Pa said. "That will make good venison. That will keep anywhere in any weather." Then he took his gun and, slinging his axe on his shoulder, he went away to the clearing to cut down some more trees. We're going to stop right there. This is what the smokehouse looks like. If you have your copy of the book, you can kind of see that. It's a hollow log, has a little door on the front. The meat is hung inside, and you can see that there's smoke coming out the top of it, right? It has a little roof on it that's slanted, and the smoke comes out through the top. And you can also see Laura on the other page with chips, little wood chips in her apron, and she's running to go and put the chips, take the chips to Ma and Pa to put inside the smokehouse. When wood is green, it means that it's fresh, like it's just been cut. If you have green wood, when you go to the hardware store, the wood's been sitting around for a long time, and so it's not green. If you were to saw it open, it's dry. But green wood is really wet and it's fresh. Just like if you break a branch off a living tree, you can see that it's green inside, and that means it has water inside of it. And so it's going to be very smoky when it burns. And that's what they want, because they want the meat to taste, yummy and smoky because they're smoking it. So it tastes yummy. Alrighty. So we're going to stop right there. And when we come back, we will pick up where we left off and we're going to we've learned how to make beef or venison jerky. And when we're done, next time we read, we're going to learn all of the things that they have to do. They're going to kill a pig and get all the food stored for winter. This book has a really beautiful, sorry, the light's very glary. This book has a really beautiful layout and span in the way it's told. We start in winter, and all of the chapters have to do with time passing, with all of the chores and tasks that the family has to do in winter or in fall. And then it goes to winter, and we see what it's like to live in a house in the woods in the 1800s in the winter when there's no grocery stores. And so they have to prepare everything so that they can survive the winter. And then we go into the spring. And after we've been through the winter, it's really exciting when spring starts happening and the snow starts melting. And then we go into the summer, and we get to see all of the things that the family does during the summer, all the chores that they do. And then right as we end the story, we're going to be heading back into winter again. So it's beautifully told. It has that seasonal, you go through all the seasons as you're reading it. And that kind of gives it the structure, this gives the book, the novel, its structure and its form. We're using the seasons as a way to tell the story, right? So it takes exactly 1 year in the life of their family, which is really kind of a lovely way of telling a story. All right, so next time we read, we're gonna slaughter a pig. Get ready. Woohoo! By the time you're done, you'll know how to slaughter a pig, and you can make your own bacon at your house. Actually, I don't think you could probably slaughter a pig. It would just be too scary. After we're done reading it, you'll go, ah, yikes. All right, so I will talk to you later. Hope you enjoyed reading with me.